Confined space, safety interview, question and answer. Question: what is a confined space? Definition: has limited or restricted means of entry or exit, is large enough for a person to enter to perform tasks, is not designed or configured for continuous occupancy. Question: what is a confined space? Confined space refers to any place, including any vessel, tank, container, pit, bund, chamber, cellar, or any other similar space which, by virtue of its enclosed nature, creates conditions that give rise to a likelihood of an accident, harm or injury of such a nature as to require emergency action due to the presence or reasonable foreseeable presence of flammable or explosive atmospheres, harmful gas, fume or vapor, free-flowing solid or an increasing level of liquid, excess of oxygen, excessively high temperature, the lack or reasonably foreseeable lack of oxygen. Question: what are the key characteristics which define a confined space? The space must be substantially enclosed. There must be a risk of at least one of the hazards listed above occurring within the space. The risk of serious injury from the hazard must be created by virtue of the enclosed nature of the space. The potential injury must be serious and be such as to require emergency action to rescue the person involved. Question: what are the hazards associated with confined spaces? Toxic atmosphere. A toxic atmosphere may cause various acute effects, including impairment of judgment, unconsciousness, and death. A toxic atmosphere may occur due to the presence or ingress of hazardous substances. These substances may be present in the confined space for various reasons such as remaining from previous processing or storage, arising from the disturbance of sludge and other deposits, the presence of a fire or flames within the space, seepage from improperly isolated adjoining plant, formation during the work processes carried out in the space, being released from under scale and in brickwork as a result of the work process, oxygen deficiency, displacement of air by another gas, various biological processes or chemical reactions, such as rotting of organic matter, rusting of metals, burning, etc., absorption of air onto steel surfaces, especially where these are damp. Oxygen enrichment. An excess of oxygen, in the presence of combustible materials, results in an increased risk of fire and explosion. Some materials, which do not burn in air, may burn vigorously or even spontaneously in an enriched oxygen atmosphere. Flammable or explosive atmospheres. A flammable atmosphere presents a risk of fire or explosion. Such an atmosphere can arise from the presence in the confined space of flammable liquids, or gases, or of a suspension of combustible dust in air. If a flammable atmosphere inside a confined space ignites, an explosion may occur, resulting in the expulsion of hot gases and the disintegration of the structure. Flowing liquid or free-flowing solids. Liquids or solids can flow into the confined space, causing drowning, suffocation, burns and other injuries. Solids in powder form may also be disturbed in a confined space, resulting in an asphyxiating atmosphere. Excessive heat. The enclosed nature of a confined space can increase the risk of heat stroke or collapse from heat stress, if conditions are excessively hot. The risk may be exacerbated by the wearing of personal protective equipment or by lack of ventilation. Question: what are the legal requirements in regard to confined space entry? A person shall not carry out work in confined spaces if it is reasonably practical that it could be avoided. If the work must be carried out, hazard identification and risk assessment must be carried out prior to the work commencing. A person shall not enter a confined space unless there is a system of work in place that has been planned, organized, performed and maintained so as to render that work safe and without risk to health. Anyone entering a confined space must be provided with appropriate information, training, and instruction appropriate to the particular characteristics of the proposed work activities. Question: what are legal requirements in relation to emergency arrangements for confined spaces? A person shall not enter a confined space unless there is a suitable emergency arrangements have been made which are appropriate to the confined space, all practical measures necessary to ensure the health and safety of those taking part in the rescue, the provision of a suitable and reliable means of raising the alarm in the event of an emergency, having all necessary rescue equipment nearby and in a well-maintained, good condition, the provision of information, instruction and training to all involved in rescue procedures, the provision of equipment and training for resuscitation procedures, if there is a foreseeable risk that they will be needed. Question: what must I look for in a confined space risk assessment? When carrying out a risk assessment, it is important to ensure that all risks associated with the hazards above are evaluated and controlled. When carrying out a risk assessment, the following questions should be asked. Question: what could be inside the space that would pose a risk? Contents: oxygen deficiency, previous contents. Oxygen enrichment, residues. Structure and layout, contamination. Question: what will be created due to the work carried out in the space? Sources of ignition. Flammable substances. Question: what's outside the space that might pose a risk during the proposed work? Inadequate isolation, inadvertent operation of plant, nearby work activities. Question: what are the key elements of a safe system of work for a confined space? Competence, training, supervision and suitability, permit to work procedure, gas purging and ventilation, dangerous residues, testing and monitoring of the atmosphere, mechanical, electrical and process isolation, respiratory protective equipment, other personal protective equipment, safe use of work equipment, communications, access and egress, flammable or explosive atmospheres, combustible materials.